And then moving forward, with your career, and then you made the jump to New Concord, Ohio to be the sports director at AVC Communications. So can you take us through, the main highlights on what it was like for you in that decade you were in New Concord? And what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned during your time there?
Well, of course, I was at WTCR 2.5 years, and I remember there was a magazine. I'm not even sure if it still exists. It may in some capacity, called Broadcast Magazine. And in the back, there would be advertisements. So radio stations around the country would advertise if they needed news, sports, sales, whatever. And I remember I would look at that because WTCR would always have a copy there. And I remember seeing that there was a need in, actually, it's Cambridge, Ohio, which is right next door to New Concord. But we'll get to that in a sec. But they had a need at a group of radio stations under the umbrella of AVC. It was Audio Visual Creations, AVC Communications. They had like four radio stations, and they were looking for a news director, but also sports. And obviously, my time at WTCR, I was doing both the news, sports director. I wasn't calling play by play because WTCR was just really music centered. But we did have news and sports casts, of course. But I did some of that with the high school football and WFGH. And so I applied for it, was able to get it, moved up there in July of 1989. Cambridge, Ohio is about an hour 15 to the east of Columbus, right off Interstate 77. As a matter of fact, they call it East Central Ohio, the eastern side of Ohio. It's right where the intersections of Interstate 70 and 77 meet. But one of the high schools that we covered was in New Concord, John Glenn High School, named after the former astronaut and senator from Ohio, U.S. Senator John Glenn. We covered Cambridge High School. We covered Meadowbrook High School, which was about 8 miles south of Cambridge in a place called Byesville. We covered Buckeye Trail High School, which was in a place called Old Washington, which was just to the east of Cambridge. And then we also, when I first started there, they had just opened another station down in Caldwell. Caldwell's about 25 minutes to the south off Interstate 77, south of Cambridge. And there were two high schools there, Caldwell High School and Shenandoah High School. So I was able to call high school football, basketball, boys basketball, girls basketball, baseball, volleyball. They didn't really have soccer programs, but those sports, some softball as well, but I was able to call those sports for AVC Communications.
Oh, that's awesome, Doug. So, did you stick to just one high school when you were there? Or, since you mentioned there were so many towns, did you bounce around from like one high school or another? So, how did that work for you?
My first couple of years, I pretty much we would put up the schedule and we would try and cover all of them. Now, the majority of the games would be Cambridge High School. That's where the majority of the advertisers were located. And we kind of split between Cambridge and Meadowbrook. Because Byesville also had some of the sponsors. Unfortunately, Old Washington, Buckeye Trail High School didn't have a lot, but we would carry a few of those games. New Concord had a few, so we carried a few John Glenn. My first couple of years, I did call Shenandoah and Caldwell games, but then we ended up getting a group, two guys who did a great job calling those Caldwell games, and they called Shenandoah games. So they kind of did, that's Noble County, Ohio, Cambridge, Buckeye Trail, Byesville, Meadowbrook High School. They were all in Guernsey County, and then John Glenn was in Muskingum County. And so I called John Glenn games, but then we got a person who kind of handled the John Glenn games. We had those two individuals who handled the Caldwell Shenandoah games. So then primarily I would call Cambridge, Meadowbrook, and Buckeye Trail games. And then later, probably about 5 years into my time with AVC, they ended up acquiring another signal. There was not another radio station at the time, but they got a signal from the FCC and they opened up another station, WB&V, out of Barnesville, which is even further east. It's not too far from the Pennsylvania line, the western part of PA, and it's right off Interstate 70, coming close to St. Clairsville, Ohio, Wheeling, West Virginia, that area and stuff, not too far from Pittsburgh, but Barnesville. I did some of their games. Then we got an individual who handled the Barnesville game. So at that time, it was primarily Cambridge, Meadowbrook, and Buckeye Trail in
What were
terms of high schools.
Okay. Oh yeah, and then so what were the biggest lessons that you learned, Doug? From your time at AVC. Oh, and also, how was it like for you also getting the chance to call college sports as well with Muskingum, if I'm pronouncing that right?
Yes. So probably about 5 years into my tenure, maybe four, we started to actually work on a package with our one AM station, WILE AM. We were able to work on a package where we sold some Muskegum games. It was just home games, so didn't get to do the road games. Actually, WMCO, the college station at Muskegum, they were the ones who handled usually home and away. So they would broadcast, the students would broadcast the home games. We would too for football, just select. We did almost every home football game and then select men's basketball games, select women's basketball games, actually called the 1992, I guess it was 92, NCAA Division III Final Four up in the Minneapolis, St. Paul. It was actually a St. Paul University, but Muskega made it to the Final Four of the women's basketball, NCAA Division III women's basketball, so called that the semifinal and championship. But it was great. It was great being able to call college because my goal when I was going to Marshall was to be the voice of a college, to be able to be the announcer, the main play-by-play announcer for a college or university. And what my aim was is to be able to travel with the team and be a part of the team. Obviously, that wasn't happening with Muskegum, but still, it was just an opportunity, be able to get some college audio onto my cassette tape for my resume building, and I loved it. I mean, the folks at Muskegum were great. It was fun being able to do some games on Saturdays because typically the high school games would be Friday nights. May have a few basketball games on Saturday for the most part. Things were on Friday nights, and so Saturdays for home Muskegum football games, for instance, we would do those and able to call a couple of NCAA tournament men's basketball games, some NCAA softball, some volleyball as well. So I was able to just broaden the horizon from the college perspective. And Muskegum is a member of the Ohio Athletic Conference. And about the time that we really started carrying some Muskegum games was when Mount Union, which has been a powerhouse in football in Division III, Mount Union kind of started its ascendancy to the top. So called a few Mount Union Muskegum games as well. But yeah, it was great to be able to add that to the repertoire of doing sports, not just high school, but also doing college.
And then